Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Bros Podcast, episode 79 today. My name is Jeremy. Welcome if it's your first time joining us on the show. I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Ilan. How are you, mate?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm great, mate. Now, today, we're talking about the talking stage. The stage in dating that a lot of us probably hate. A lot of us, if you're still single and you're listening to this, absolutely despise. It can be a lot of rinse and repeat of the same stuff. So we're going to dive in and talk about the talking stage, what to say, what not to say, how to go about doing it. So let's kick it off. What do you have to say, mate?
I feel like it's the biggest buzz term of dating nowadays is the talking stage. I feel like everyone's got a different conceptualization of what it is. Like, is it pre-date? Is it when you've started dating but you're not exclusive? Is it, before? Is it the label given before you two are, labeled boyfriend and girlfriend? So take it away, Jeremy. Define what the actual talking stage is.
Definition of the talking stage. I'm not quite entirely sure we need a definition for it, but rather just the notion that you're sussing each other out. You're getting a vibe of this person. You're trying to decipher whether this person is fit enough for you to go on a date, whether you'd feel comfortable with this person. And I think that's all the talking stage needs to be. That's assuming, that is the talking stage before a date. And then you've got the talking stage, when you are going on a date. Maybe you've gone on a couple dates, and that's where things start to feel a little bit more relatable. But let's say it's on a dating app. Let's start there, because that's going to be a different talking stage to an organic connection in person, right? I feel like with a talking stage across a dating app, there's a few little tips and games to play almost, and those things should be kept relatively short, sharp, and quick. It shouldn't be drawn out too long. Say you've matched with someone and you're awaiting that first message. If you really want to talk to that someone, firstly, be the one to send that message. Guy or girl, I don't think it matters. Don't wait for that message. Send that message. Now, what should that message be? It should be something a little bit more than just a hey. It shouldn't be a creepy pickup line or a cheesy pickup line that's definitely copy and pasted from the internet. Just keep it natural. Just say something that relates to their profile that, is maybe perhaps a little bit interesting. We could make a whole episode on, openers and the ins and outs of dating online and how to go about it. But for an opener, it should just be a hey followed by something relating to their profile. Something you like, something that you've picked up on. And then, develop a little bit of chat. How much chat? I don't think a lot. I think it should be kept to a minimum. And I think if you've developed a couple of messages back and forth with this person, it's pretty safe to then ask for getting them off the app and then getting them, getting their phone number and talking like adults elsewhere. I think if you draw it out a little bit too long on an app, you're just delaying the inevitable of, maybe they're just going to find someone else and swipe right on someone else and have another talking stage with them. I think if you can be the one to develop a little bit of chat to build that initial rapport, but then say, hey, what's your number? I'd love to talk to you elsewhere. Or what's your Instagram? I'd love to talk to you elsewhere. You're then getting them off that app that everyone else is on, and your responses with them is going to be a lot more direct and a lot more noted, because when you enter that Hinge app, you're just another fish in the sea amongst a whole lot of other people. There's a whole lot of unread messages there. You're likely going to be one of them. So that's why if you can get them off there, it's a little bit more private. It's a little bit more intimate in that initial talking stage of building a connection.
Jeremy, I'm going to recommend you go into Skillshare right now. You make up a private course, how to send the perfect dating app message.
I still don't know the answer, mate.
From first message to first date, I reckon you'd earn a lot of money doing that. I like what you said there, though, because think about how many messages that person's receiving on those dating apps. You almost want to have a point of difference, do you not?
You absolutely need to have a point of difference. And that's why your point of difference shouldn't be something so entirely out of the ordinary. It should be something that just shows that you have picked up on something about that person's profile. Something that isn't creepy, but something that looks a little bit that comes across as a little bit observant of something that you've seen on their profile, whether it's a hobby, whether it's an experience, whether it's something that they're wearing, whether it's a type of drink that they're drinking, their pet, whatever it may be, but just something a little bit personal that's not creepy, but just makes you seem a little bit more observant. Because if you're just hitting up a girl or a guy and just saying like, hey, you're so pretty, hey, I really like your eyes, blah, 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 the response is just going to be a thank you. And then you're just left with needing to come up with another message to instigate conversation. That's why it should be really like just about a certain thing first. I feel like trying to talk about their appearance is just a dead end street, because a thank you is just going to be your response, and you're just going to have to, yeah, like I said, pick it up with something else and start again. That's if you get a response.
If you get a response, assuming you do though, assuming you have a bit of that mutual interest, how long should you be waiting to actually ask them out on a date? And do you reckon you should actually be talking between, for example, let's say they have agreed that they want to go on a date with you. I'm a huge believer that you probably don't want to chat too much after you seal the date. The phone should be just there for logistics purposes and save all your good stuff for that first meeting. What do you reckon?
Great question. Should be kept to a bare minimum. I think if you are texting this person prior to a date, it should be either to a minimum about leading up to the date in terms of the details, because there needs to be some level of communication. Like if it's a Monday night and you've booked the date for Saturday night that week, that's a lot of days in between, and the person wants to feel comfortable that, you know, that date is still going ahead and that there's still a bit of rapport there, you know, especially if this is a hinge date and you don't know each other well enough yet. There should be something, but it shouldn't be messaging every day. It shouldn't be a lot of, what are you getting up to? How was your day? How are you feeling? All of these.
Well, that's relationship talk almost, isn't it?
It's relationship talk, and it's just talk for the sake of talk. Let's be honest. Nobody enjoys doing that. And you will start to fizzle out the people that are not going to be important to you when it comes to dating if you stop doing all of that rubbish talk just to fill in gaps as well.
I can't actually agree with you there, because I think a lot of people, if you've just met someone and you've got really good chemistry with them and you're feeling this urge to text them all the time, I'd say there's probably an edge of like organic interest that you want to probably learn more about that person. But I would still agree with you that you probably should keep the talking to a bare minimum. My reasoning though is that you're actually going to probably build an impression of an insight of this person based purely on text message rather than what you've seen in person. And I think you actually run the risk of developing this false impression of who they are purely based off text messages. And then when you see them in person, that impression that you've built doesn't actually match the profile of who they are in real life.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why it should be kept to a minimum. And you mentioned like the urge to text them if you feel like you've got some good initial chemistry, even just off texting. And that's fine. You know, we've all felt that at some stage. We've all felt like, wow, like I've actually connected with this person on a pretty good level, even though it's just maybe a couple of days of texting. But it's about controlling that urge. Keep that urge for in person when
Agreed.
You can meet up with them in person, and then you can start like diving deep into your conversation and asking all the questions you want to ask and finding out about that person organically. Like I said, if it's a Tuesday and you've asked them to meet up with you on a Saturday for a first date, keep those days in between as maybe just if there's like some personal jokes that maybe you've developed across your text messaging, keep it at a minimum like that. Avoid the how's your day going? How's work been? How's your week been? Avoid those questions because that's just filling up gaps, like I said. But if it's a Tuesday and you said, hey, let's meet up on a Saturday, follow that up with, I'll text you later in the week to confirm, or I'll text you on the Thursday about the details, and you know, we'll go from there. I think if you give that person that time frame, they can expect to hear from you, and then they therefore know that, okay, this guy is 1, trustworthy with following through with his plans, 2, is taking initiative, which is hot and attractive, and 3, you're not left in the dark. You know what to expect. You know that you can afford to have those few days without texting, and it feels okay. It feels normal because Thursday comes around, you're going to confirm those plans. And then Saturday, you're meeting up and you're actually getting along in person, having that talking stage in person, like human beings, not like children over Snapchat.
Compare that to a job interview. You're not texting the employment agency, all the time, being like, I'm so excited to have my job interview.
It's a great analogy.
You lock down that day, you send the Teams link, or you send the address of where, you're going to have that interview. You go there, and the rest is hopefully history. And I think that's probably a good way and a good analogy to compare it to. But I want to shift the conversation now. You've had that first date, and as you said, the talking stage isn't just restricted up until that first date. The talking stage can be, that getting to know you stage. So what happens with that talking stage after that first date? Is it more acceptable to text a bit more? Is it still the same philosophy of just like use the phone just to meet up again? What's the right balance to strike here?
It's a balance, like you said. It's about striking a balance between that. And I think talking to them constantly throughout the day preceding that first date is love bombing to an extent. You still don't really know that person. It's one date. And I'm a believer that that first date doesn't even count, because I think on a first date, you can essentially put on this whole persona of being someone that you're not. I feel like you truly get to know someone maybe going into that second date. That second date is that true first date, because you start to pick up on habits that start to resemble that person, qualities that make sense based off of that first date. But, if you reach that second date and this person is coming across completely different to you, then things just don't add up. So that's why I say that first date is a little bit of a dress rehearsal almost. Second date is where you start to pick up on a little bit of habits that make sense. But back to your question, that first date has happened. Still keep the conversation to a minimum. Like, don't be spamming them throughout the day. If you're texting someone constantly after a first date every single day, I don't think that's genuine interest. I think that is building that false sense of connection that, maybe you're feeling a void.
So I'm not disagreeing with you that that's a no-no, but all I'm saying to that is if someone's willing to almost mimic a relationship dynamic with a person after one date, their sole purpose there is to try and disarm them. That's why a lot of people say that individuals who do that, they could be narcissistic in nature. They want to disarm you and get you so vulnerable so that they can then, impose themselves on you. You'd agree though that, first date, it's like the job interview. So you're not going to try and, mimic the relationship dynamic. Why would you? It's like they're a stranger to you. What's appropriate versus inappropriate in the talking stage? Like, let's say you're trying to decipher who might be a good potential partner for you. What are the certain things you can pick up on during that talking stage that can either, at least for you, Jeremy, rule that person out?
Well, I think
versus rule them in.
Creepiness is a big one. If someone is coming across as creepy, and I think it's fair to say that girls probably experience this a little bit more than guys. If there are guys talking about sexual type of comments in the very early stages, that can very much like scare someone away and can be a red flag. If it's mutual and if it's coming across in your actions together, then it's fair game. Like if you're both talking that way to one another. But if one person seems like they're not really giving that type of vibe and the other person is, that can definitely be a bit inappropriate in that early stage. Intimacy is something that should come naturally and come mutually between you guys. And that's why that first date is a great way to sense that, is there some form of romantic energy here as well? And that's where, your physical touch comes in that first date. And physical touch doesn't necessarily mean getting intimate with them on the first date, but should be, if it's just like gestures here and there, a hand hold, a little like nudge on the thigh, like just being a little bit emotive in your body language. That's like some physical touch. That's drawing upon some romanticism so that hopefully you start to build that romantic connection so that, intimacy can be something that you start to generate mutually with that person. So I feel like, creepiness is one. That's an inappropriate way to go about that talking stage. Two, probably like, mentioning things about diving into things that are quite serious really quickly. So cautioning to being very intentional about what you want in a relationship very, very early on when you're only just starting to get to know that person. I think there's a difference between talking about what you expect in a relationship and talking about wanting that with that person that you're with. Again, whether we call it love bombing or something else, if you're saying like, I love you so, so much already, and I know my family's going to love you so, so much. I know my friends are going to love you.
Have you experienced this before?
I don't think I've experienced that before, but that's definitely apparent, and that can definitely happen where, yeah, after one date, after two dates, people talk that way. And that's, again, my way of defining love bombing is by cautioning towards those things that are a little bit more serious, a little bit more intimate, very, very early on after the first date. If you're already saying to that person, my family's going to love you, my grandparents are going to love you, my friends are going to love you, when you're only just getting to know that person, I believe that's love bombing, and I believe that's quite inappropriate off one date with a few text messages in between. You're still getting to know that person. That can definitely scare them away.
Yeah, I would actually caution you to run if you're ever in that situation. I think if that person's willing to try and tie you down after one date, and they're not being, maybe they really like you. Maybe it was just an excellent first date. But potentially that person is just reminding themselves that, hey, it was just one date. Let's see where else this goes. But, they're picking all the boxes, but they're not allowing that fantasy in their head to, derail what's happening. That's fine. But I think as soon as they kind of lose control and they start trying to almost control you, they lose control of themselves, and then they also try to, mimic that relationship dynamic, definitely run, because what does that signify in that person's life,
That there's a void that they're trying to fill.
Void, there could be a narcissist, there could be a myriad of other things going on for them that you just don't know about. And, if they're willing to, it also shows what standards do they have. You've been on one date with this person. Like, you want to be a selective over them, and you want to hope to a certain degree that your partner is selective of who they pick. Because if they're happy to just date anyone after one date, then, what standards do they really have? And that's not a very attractive thing, is it?
Yeah. You should not be glorifying someone after a couple of dates. You are no different to them in the grand scheme of things. They have only gotten to know you to the extent that you've gotten to know them. You might be really, really impressed by that person, and rightly so. And we hope that you are impressed by those people that you have seen in those early stages. That means that person has really grabbed your attention and swept you up, and you really want to see them again. But if you are pedestalizing them, glorifying them, talking about them in this light to them in a way that is, they think that they've got it in the bag already, they've got you in the bag already, you need to ask yourself and remind yourself that this is just a person that you've only met a couple of times. Save that for in due course, and keep those things to yourself in those initial stages, because you don't want to scare that person away. You can be really impressed by them in those initial stages, but there's an element of keeping things to yourself as well and not saying everything, because, you want to be chaste to an extent as well. And what I mean by chaste is it's not being poor in your communication and you guessing about what is going on. But if you're already saying how much you love them after one date or two dates, they already feel like there's no room for screwing up, that everything is signed, sealed, and delivered, and that, you're going to end up dating already. I feel like voice to them that, you really, really like them and you can see a lot of good qualities in them. But the whole talk about future stuff too early on, I think that should just be kept as to yourself in a way.
Yeah, I think there's a massive difference between the whole future talk and trying to lock the person down. There's a difference between that and, the two people having genuine chemistry with one another and, actively being like, yeah, I really enjoy spending time with this person. I'd love to get to know them more. And, even if that means them being, having a crush on one another, a bit earlier than what you would generally expect. Like maybe you'd expect that sort of thing to happen after you've seen them multiple times over multiple weeks. But for some people, two people just get along really well. They may have already been friends prior, but let's say for the sake of the example that, they had a really banging first date, they had a really banging second date, and they've got such unbelievable chemistry. Things might move naturally quicker with those two people, and everyone's different. And I think
as long as it's mutual
as long as it's mutual, and I think, yes, I agree. As long as there's no sort of trying to emulate the relationship too early on, that's fine. But I think also just understanding that some people don't want to play games as well. They don't want to play those stupid games in the talking stage. And I know you mentioned it earlier, but can you go into a little bit of depth about what those games are? Because is it the whole push-pull thing? Is it the whole idea of I don't want to show my cards too early? Because I would argue, and maybe this is a misrepresentation of what you've said, but I would argue for the sake of practicality, it is so much more simple to say to that person on that first date what you're looking for, not with them specifically. It's a job interview, right? We're looking for this candidate to fulfill this role. Just like in the same way you're saying, I'm looking for someone potentially to be in a serious long-term relationship with. Obviously, you'd phrase it in a bit less of a weird way. You'd phrase it in a more intentional way. But what's this push-pull dynamic, and can it be complemented by explaining to the person who you're seeing what you truly want?
Yeah, well, one of my friends once told me that toxic games brings toxic energy and toxic people. And that's what I mean when I talk about games and navigating against those games. When I think of games, I think of the texting game. Often there is that texting game that people often think about, which is she texted me 8 hours after I last sent that text message. I therefore have to wait 8 hours. That is a toxic game. And if you decide to play that toxic game, you're only going to attract a element of toxicity within that relationship. You need to just be yourself. Be yourself. Don't play those games. Don't play the texting game. If someone has texted you a while after you've messaged them, be the bigger person and message back. That's not to say you need a message back within that first second of reading it if they've, made you wait a hell of amount of time. But it shouldn't be a calculated thing of waiting X amount of hours because you had to do so as well. That's where maturity can really be seen in the talking stage. And I know that firsthand as well. If I've sent off a message and she has only responded hours on end after I'm being responsive to her, you pick up on that game and you recognize that, maybe this person isn't intentional in wanting to pursue a date here. On the other side of the games, the game that I think should be played is the one I mentioned at the start with the intentionality behind getting them off of the dating app, for example. Play that game where you actually make the first move in that game to be I want to move off here. Let's talk elsewhere. Give me your phone number. Pick up the phone, ring them, be a traditionalist like that. If that's a bit freaky, then send a voice message. I feel like by making those moves, you're going to stand out. Voice messages are great. You come across as yourself by sending a voice message. It's not manufactured. By playing the game of texting for too long, you have time to manufacture a glorious response. You can chat GPT with that response. But you know what? When you eventually meet up with that person, that's where your chat will truly be tested. So keep things to a minimum in text messaging. But if you are choosing to talk a little bit over text, voice messages are great because you can come across as yourself. You're put on the spot. That person will be able to see you for you, and they can make a pretty fair assessment of that.
I love that. Jeremy, on that note, what would you say are the 3 key takeaways before we wrap up this episode when it comes to the talking stage?
Don't play toxic games. So like the point we just mentioned, don't be one to try calculate when to send a text message, how to send it. Should you send that emoji? Should you not send that emoji? At the end of the day, you are only going to attract a person that you want to attract for yourself. If you are quite responsive in your messages, you're an emoji sender and you decide to dish off emojis, you will attract someone that will want to be doing that with you as well. So Toxic games brings toxic people. Remember that. Be yourself during the talking stage and you will attract someone that you ultimately want to attract. Tip number 2 is stop delaying when you ask the person out. I don't think there's any shame in asking someone out pretty soon after getting to know them, matching with them, whatever it is. That's not to say your first opening line should be, hey, let's meet up on Saturday, because we all know, let's be rational, we're human beings, think a little bit logically here. But it doesn't need to be, okay, I need to wait 4 days before asking them out. If you've, had a few messages back and forth and there's a little bit of rapport building, send that message. There's no need to wait. We're all on these apps for the same reason. We all want to meet people. So ask the question. The worst thing that they can say is no, or they ghost you and they don't respond. But, in the positive light, if someone says, hey, you know what? That sounds great. Epic. Tip number 3, don't feel the need to constantly be talking. Outline your intentions with your talking. So if it is about organizing your dates, say, let's catch up on Saturday, but I will message you on Thursday, a couple of days prior, to hit you up with the plans, like we mentioned at the start of the episode. And that's just showing some intentionality with your talking, because I feel like often we fall into the trap of, once we start talking to a person, we feel like we need to keep it going. And the moment it stops, you think, oh my God, they're not responding to me. They must not like me anymore. There must not be interest there. But if you can get into the habit of just being intentional with your text messages, messaging when there is a purpose to message, you will avoid the whole awkwardness of having days in between your messaging later on during the talking stage. So tip number 1, avoid toxic games. Tip number 2, be yourself and don't be shy to make that first move, because worst case, you're just going to get rejected, which is only going to build your character anyway. And tip number 3, don't feel the need to constantly be pumping that person with messages in the talking stage.
I love that. On that note, everyone, don't blow up anyone's phones. Don't love bomb anyone. Just play it cool, and download Jeremy's new Skillshare app from first text to first date.
Don't have a Skillshare app. Don't think I'll plan on it.
Skillshare course rather, but I think you should.
I don't think so.
Another multiple streams of income.
Nah, look, I think it's just it should be made simple after all. That's just my mentality. Like,
keep it practical, keep it simple sort of thing. Yeah.
Keep it practical, keep it simple. Just be yourself, because it's a cliche because it's true. But like, if you try to put up this persona of someone you're not, that's what you're going to attract. If you really want to be intentional with your dating and you want to come across good people, whether it's seriously, whether it's just casually, and have good rapport with people, that should be just made and developed by being yourself. So keep it simple. Don't be afraid of rejection. We all cop it. Just going to make you better for the long run.
Love it. On that note, guys, hope you have a lovely Tuesday and a very great and productive and fulfilling week. See ya.
Bye.